Welcome back to the Journal of a CNY Entrepreneur, episode
3
with my friend and owner of Ataviz Consulting, Nick Johnson. Nick and I had such an interesting conversation. We talked about his past as a math teacher, how he goes about owning a data analytics company. We discussed where Nick grew up and the shortcomings of the modern day education system. I learned a lot about Nick, I learned a lot about his past, and I had a ton of fun as always. Here we go.
All my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle paid the price. Want a slice, got to roll the dice, that's why. All my life, I've been grinding all my life. Look, all my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice.
All right, Nick, appreciate you hopping on the show. First things first, kind of what's your business and, what kind of got you into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so my business is Ataviz Consulting. We provide data analytics, data solutions for businesses of all sizes. So things that we basically have 6 main points of service that we have. We have data analytics, data visualization, predictive modeling, artificial intelligence, data strategy, and then automation. So anything that's typically a combination of those things is what I tend to provide to my clients, and everything is very customized. So it's not like I have a set, here's what I can do. Although I'm trying to put together a little bit of a product list so people can kind of pick and choose a little bit. Everything is so super customized that it's more about educating people than it is about going into some sales spiel about it is what I do. It's more like, here are the things I can provide. Let's see how it fits with what it is that you provide. So my businesses that I would, provide solutions for kind of fit in all industries. I do currently work for the government as a consultant with what I do as well. I've worked with startups, solopreneurs. I've been in the sports industry, e-commerce, retail, real estate. It fits basically everywhere. It's just where, somebody's willing to listen and, have a conversation about how can I save money and time using these things? Because most people don't really understand it, or if they do, it's at a very superficial level. The way that I got into this is actually by accident. I was a high school math teacher. COVID happened. The whole data analytics industry kind of came to the forefront. It was in the news a lot, so I was reading up on it. And I noticed that all the things that they did in that industry were things that I was already doing as a teacher just because they made sense to me. I was already automating workbooks and things like that would make my grading much more efficient. I was using dashboards and things in my classroom to help kids understand where they were doing well and where they weren't doing so well, and it helped them visualize where they needed to work on things. And all of a sudden I look at this data analytics, and that's exactly what they do. So I started teaching myself a few more tools that, would be used in the corporate world, and I started freelancing. Freelancing turned into a lot more business. It turned into my company. And at some point, 2 years ago, I had enough business where I said, all right, I'm leaving education and focusing on this 100%.
The best things in life are always things that just come upon naturally. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I've always had it in my mind, like, work for yourself, have a business. Like, that's always been something that's been in the back. I just never knew what it was. I would always think, oh, let me sell something. Let me do something like that. And in the end, it turned into actually a service.
Growing up, were you the kid, the entrepreneur kid going door to door selling, chocolate, or was entrepreneurship kind of something that just fell into your lap, like you said?
It really fell into my lap. I wasn't so much that, like door to door selling things type of kid, but I was very much the kid. I was very much a nerd. I was on the computer all the time. I was making websites at 10 years old. For no particular reason. I wasn't even selling them. I was just doing it because it was fun. And, so I had a background in coding and things like that, but I've always, one thing that's always been a stickler with me is efficiency. I've always found a way to become more efficient and do something differently. And one of the worst things that I personally can be told, especially, in any business that I was working with throughout my life, was we do it this way because it's the way we've always done it. Like, to me, that's the worst thing you can say to me. That just screams inefficiency when I can find a way to do things better, faster, whatever it may be. So I've always prided myself on saving time. One of the things I say a lot is I can always make another $1, but I can't make another hour. Right. So I always want to do something to save time because it's the most valuable thing in this life. So I'm going to spend 5 hours being able to save myself a half an hour. But that when I'm saving myself a half an hour every day, every week, whatever it may be, that adds up, and I'm very quickly making that time back. And in the end, I'm again saving time, becoming more efficient.
Are there any processes or anything specifically you're looking for as far as advice you can give someone else that to really, streamline your time and buy those hours back for yourself?
I think being lazy is one of the best things you can do if you use it the right way, right? When I was a kid growing up, I was always labeled the lazy kid, right? I was, always slacking. I was a procrastinator, things like that. And what I did eventually is I turned it around. So instead of waiting till the last second to do something, I said, let me do this really quickly. So I still have that time to do what it is that I want to do, but I still get the job done. And that turned into efficiency. So, it's an intelligent laziness. I'm figuring out ways to do things better and faster because I can. That way I can save time and do all the things that, I do want to do instead of all the things I don't. And unfortunately, no matter what it is that we're in, I'm in a business right now that I love. I can work on things for my clients. And to me, it's almost therapeutic. Sitting on a computer and kind of doing things. If I'm having a rough day or something, I will hop in, and if I have nothing to work on for my client, I will just update my website because being in code to me is like therapy. So if I can go in and, do things and change things up that maybe I don't want to have to do later on, but I spend some time focusing on it now, then later on, I can, again, do all the things that I want. I can spend time with my family, and I'm making that time up. So I can balance being a full-time consultant for the federal government. I can balance having a business. I can balance having 2 kids under 4 years old, and do all the things that I need to do very quickly.
I think it was I believe it was Steve Jobs, and I'm paraphrasing, that said, hire lazy people and get out of their way. They'll figure out how to streamline everything and make it so much quicker because they're lazy, right?
Right. Exactly. That's exactly the person that I am. High school and everything which is funny because I became a teacher, but high school to me was never a concern of mine. I did terrible in high school. I was the worst student ever. As a matter of fact, I was called out because I did very well on tests. So teachers always thought that I was cheating. So I got called into the office all the time because they thought I was cheating, but I was just I didn't do any of my homework. I was just efficient with what I did and, how I learned things. And so I did very well on tests. I just didn't follow the quote unquote process. Which is funny because later on I became a teacher.
In high school, I was the same exact way. I didn't do any homework, didn't really pay attention as much in class, but I would always ace the tests, and my grades were just good enough. And it's not that I didn't know the material, it just wasn't interesting to me. So it was hard for me to pay attention. And I wasn't, the thought of homework didn't really make sense to me at that time.
Right. In my eyes, I didn't see how it was benefiting me. And what's funny is after being a high school teacher, I still feel that way a lot about high school education. I don't really see how high school education, the way it currently sits, benefits kids. I really don't.
I agree.
So that was, again, part of the reason I left. There were a few reasons, but until I really saw the finish line when it came to education, which of course now I have a bachelor's, I have a master's degree. Like I have all these things, right? But if you had told my teachers that in high school, they would have laughed.
Yep. Same. Did you grow up in the area, Nick? What high school did you go to?
So I tell people I grew up on the Thruway. So I bounced back and forth a lot between Beeville, Liverpool, and Rochester.
Okay.
So I actually went to high school in Rochester. Although I went to primary school, middle school, and everything out here. I was in Beeville for elementary. I went to Ludden for a couple years, and then I bounced out to high school in Rochester.
So what brought you back to the Syracuse area?
My parents actually moved back, I want to say like halfway through my senior year. And I didn't want to switch schools because I was halfway through my senior year. So I actually commuted to high school from Syracuse. I drove to Rochester. I would stay at my grandparents' house sometimes, like during the week and everything. I finished my high school career in Rochester. They moved out here, so I kind of followed. I didn't go to college for 3 years. I kind of hung around, bartended. I was a server. And then I decided, all right, this life is not giving me what I want, so I need to make a change. And that's what drove me to say, okay, now I'm going to go to college and do something.
Did you find when you went to college your ability to, for me, like I said, I struggled paying attention and doing homework in high school. Then when I got to college, I got a little older, was studying things I was interested in. And I got 1B in 4 years, and that's including my master's, so 5 now.
Yeah.
You get a little older, you get a little bit more mature, you see the importance of things. Number one, and number two, I was studying things I was interested in, and I didn't have to sit in a classroom all day. And I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I can't sit still. My mind's always moving. I have ADHD. I know I do.
Right. Informal diagnosis. Yeah.
Did you did you have that similar experience?
I did. So I knew so I was still in Syracuse at the time, and I knew if I went to school, the things that I was doing outside of school would have prevented me from doing well. So I actually chose to go to a community college in Utica, just to be far enough away where I was kind of in my own bubble a little bit. So I did that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I was good at math. So I actually started out in accounting. Became very quickly bored with accounting. And decided to switch into strict mathematics. And I ended up transferring down to Binghamton and finished out my bachelor's there, and ended up taking courses just in insanely cool things that were super interesting to me, but not really something that would make me money, I guess.
Sure.
Not anything that would help me in my career wise. So, I had this bachelor's in math. I ended up, getting out looking for a job and couldn't find a thing. A bachelor's in math doesn't actually get you anywhere, surprisingly, because there's no application to it. I'm good with numbers. All right, so what career is that? Who knows?
Right.
So I actually went into sales. I was a car salesman for 6 years after I got my bachelor's, and I did very well. I was making six figures. I bought a house, paid off my student loans. I'm very glad I did it, but very quickly burnt out. I guess I don't know if 6 years is that quickly, but ended up burning out and said, okay, I'm going to make a change now. And that's what I decided. Okay, I'm either going MBA or education. And in my mind, an MBA wouldn't have got me anything I already didn't have. I already had a bad schedule and a lot of money. So an MBA would have done the exact same thing. So I said, all right, let's do something different. I was tutoring friends and things like that in math. I enjoyed doing that. And although I hated my own high school experience, I was like, all right, let me just see what it's about. And I ended up having a phenomenal co-teacher who taught me a bunch of things to do that were different than I'd ever seen before. And I really gravitated towards that and said, all right, let's do this. So I finished off my master's while I was in sales. Ended up being a teacher for another 6 years. So I guess I'm about 6 years per career at this point. And then, the whole data analytics kind of started while I was doing that.
What is it about math that you find so interesting? Was there something that happened, when you were a kid? Is it something you've always been interested in? Anything in the early life that you think shaped that love for math?
So, I was very, early on, I was very much a gamer. I played, video games a lot growing up. I mean, this was back in the desktop computer dial-up AOL type days, of course, right?
Beep, beep, beep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would play games on DOS, so I was even in there at a young age, doing coding, building websites. Math is always something that made sense to me. I was never somebody, it was when I was a kid, it was very frustrating to have to read a fiction book, a fiction novel, and give my opinion on it. To me, that was a complete waste of time because my opinion doesn't matter. It's somebody else's work. Right. And that's just how I felt about those things back then. Now, obviously I'm matured a bit, you feel a little bit differently, but back then it was more or less because it came easy. It made sense that there was a right answer. There may be multiple ways to get there, but there was an answer. And that's what kind of gravitated towards it. I think the fact that it was a bit of a novelty kind of had a little something too, just because people in general aren't good at it. So the fact that I was, it was kind of cool because not many people are. And I think that, kind of resonated with me a bit too. And it grew from there to a point where I was just kind of looking things up because they were interesting or I thought they were cool or I had an idea and I wanted to know if it was real, if it, existed or whatever the case may be. So I started looking things up. I did a lot of just reading about things like, space and everything else. So just kind of all around nerd, that's just what made sense to me.
Do you find yourself still doing that? Just kind of researching things that you find interesting?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a whole bunch of Hawking's books and everything. I'll read up on something just because it's cool to me. I mean, that's how I learned everything that I do for clients. That's how I learned how to build AI. There's not a textbook or, a course that you can go to. I mean, there probably is now, but a few years ago, there wasn't a textbook on how to build AI. AI didn't exist. So it was very much, diving into something and playing with it. And that's, in my opinion, the best way to learn.
Totally agree. I do the same thing. I'll find myself scrolling on Google or on whatever, and I'll find something about a star. And I'm like, oh, got to spend the next week learning everything there is to know about this star. So
right.
Totally relate. But we've talked a lot about work. Anything outside of work, activities, hobbies wise that you find, really fulfilling and enjoyable for yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was a teacher, I did coach a year of basketball. Basketball's been huge in my life. I played it my entire life. I was the kid that would come home from school in high school and go right to the Y and play basketball for 4 hours,
Mhm.
right, and work out and whatever. So I was very much that kid, and I really played up until COVID. Basketball and volleyball were my two sports. And I would play in leagues everywhere I could. COVID happened. I had a pretty gnarly elbow injury due to volleyball, so I actually have a bunch of plates and screws in my elbow now. I can still play, just kind of life happened. Got married, have a couple kids now. COVID, new business, so it's been a few years since I've done that. I'd love to get back into it, in the near future. But those are my personal hobbies.
Sure. And it sounds like you have a lot going on in your personal life right now, as far as, scaling a new business, two youngsters at home, married. How do you kind of navigate balancing that professional and personal life? And any advice to anyone who's also scaling a business with two youngsters at home?
Split your time. And I'm still working on it. I haven't mastered it quite yet. Make time specifically for certain things. So I've got my government work that I do during the day. As soon as I'm done with that, for the most part, 4 to 8, I try to spend with my family as much as I can in terms of not scheduling meetings. Things are going to happen, and meetings are going to pop up and things, especially when I have my own business and my own clients. But really try to kind of push them to particular times that work. After 4 o'clock, give or take, and then 8 or 9 o'clock after the kids go to bed. Then I'll tend to work on my business. So it's just kind of separating things out and having specific times. I like to kind of tap into my OCD for work related things in terms of like scheduling and things like that. And then I just turn it off for my personal life, so I don't have it there.
Yep.
But it's just being very intentional about separating things out.
Sure.
When I was a teacher, I was very, again, pushing the efficiency thing. I tried to be the person that never brought grading home. I would never bring work home. And now that I have my business, my work is at home. So
Right.
it's a little bit, it's more difficult, but I try to have a separate space for things. You can see my office behind me. It's, a little crazy right now, but I'm trying to get it to a point where I've got this separate space, as opposed to kind of just working on the couch sometimes, which is what I was doing early on, and comfortable, but I need to have my separate spaces and kind of keep everything separated. So.
Right. And you did kind of gloss over it briefly, but are there any specific routines or practices you've adopted to kind of maintain that equilibrium? For myself, I use my phone calendar. Everyone knows if you make plans with me, if it's not on my calendar, it does not exist. Anything like that for you, or any advice you'd give as far as a specific routine or practice that really works for you?
That exact thing. I'm absolutely a phone calendar person. My entire life is in my phone. It comes to the point where many times my wife won't even tell me that we're going to be doing something. It just goes on the calendar. Because whether she tells me or not, it's irrelevant. If it's not there, I don't know about it. I'm not doing it.
Right.
So yeah, I very much live on that. I have, so many different calendars for all the different things that I have. I'm very much a spreadsheet person. Obviously I work in data, but, I keep everything organized in spreadsheets. It's hyper OCD. If you look at like the way my computer files are set up, or my Google Drive is set up, whatever the case may be. I do a lot of my scheduling, my project management, everything directly through Excel sheets. I don't use, the Monday.coms or anything like that, just because I prefer to have complete control over how everything works. So I develop my own, spreadsheets to do all those things.
Got it. I think that's really helpful. As far as your business, you said that you started it during COVID. So would you say it's 4 years old now? 3 years old?
Yeah. So, I mean, the business itself, I would say, didn't start early on. I was freelancing, so I was doing the work, but it wasn't under my business name,
Got it.
And it kind of just developed to a point where I said, all right, I need to start, marketing this a bit. And I didn't want to market it under myself because I was still teaching. So I didn't want to, have parents come across and say, oh, well, this guy's working an entire second career while he's a teacher. And, that, of course, that could cause problems. So, I started opening my business and kind of doing it under my business name, and it flourished. And I kept getting clients. Eventually had a big government client. And that was enough where I said, all right, I need to decide now, am I doing this part-time or am I going to full-time make the change? So I ended up making the change and kind of going all in.
Was there one specific moment or one specific day you can remember that you were like, you know what, screw it, I'm going full-time on this?
There was a specific moment that said, I need to get out of education. without giving too many specifics for, obvious reasons.
Yep.
During COVID, all the kids were working from home, right? And I caught a kid cheating on a test, right? It happens. It's COVID. Like, I get it, but I'm not going to just ignore it. Like, I need to talk to you about it, right? Long story short, it ended up that it's not necessarily that the kid cheated. The parent cheated for them. So the parent helped them out, and not only did the parent help them out, but they had to look up the answer because, of course, it's high school math, and they weren't aware of how to do it. So they looked up the answer, which is an incredibly convoluted way. It had the answer in a very specific format that was very clear. No kid and or parent would do it, because even if the parent knew how to do it the right way, putting it in the format that they did made absolutely zero sense. And I found it online, where they had, done this. And so I called them out, and, parents mad at me. And that was so I'm just, if the student doesn't care, which they're a teenager, they're not going to care. I get that, but they need to. It's the accountability they need to learn.
Yep.
If the parent doesn't care, and not only doesn't care, but is actively helping them do this, what am I doing? And that was a moment where I was just like, wow, like this just
I think
not for me anymore.
That's kind of the biggest thing across the board that I hear is parents really just ruin it for the kids on every aspect, especially sports. I haven't really so I coach football, baseball, and basketball for my kids. Luckily, I haven't run into any tough situations with parents, but I know referees, coaches who are done because parents are just ruining it for everyone right now. Right. And obviously education, it sounds friends that I'm with, it's always the teacher's fault. Kids are never accountable. It's never the kid's fault. It's just not a good way to teach the next generation at all.
Right. I'm held more accountable for the kid than their own parent is. And, to a point, I get it. Like but I only see them for 40 minutes a day or whatever the case may be, whatever school you're at, whatever schedule it is. But if I'm held more accountable than the parent is, what are we doing? I can't, in the 40 minutes that I see your kid in a curriculum that I have to teach, I cannot also raise your kid.
Right.
Right. So I try to instill all the things that I can and, instill accountability and, curiosity, because I think education is built to kill curiosity in kids. And, every kid starts out typically in elementary school very eager to learn things. And by middle school, it's dead. And, so I try to, instill and teach. I mean, I taught math. How many kids are excited to be in a math class? That would be exactly zero, right? Or maybe one if I'm lucky. So I try to do and just teach nothing that had to do with the curriculum. But every once in a while, a couple times a year, I would throw in something that I just thought was incredibly cool. And even the kids did too. I would teach things about the wave frequencies of colors and how the color pink doesn't actually exist because it doesn't have a wavelength. And the color pink is built by our eyes, biology, as opposed to it being an actual color with a wavelength, right? So things like that. I taught different sizes of infinity. There's not one infinity. There's actually way different sizes. And there's a really cool video on YouTube called Hotel Infinity that describes it in a very cool way using a cartoon. And just talk about it. And those are the best conversations I have with my kids.
I know for myself and a lot of my peers, it's usually not what you're learning, it's who's teaching it that makes it interesting. Right. And a good teacher and a bad teacher, likewise, can make or break a class no matter what you're learning.
Right. And to me, it comes across, at least in my opinion, and the way my personality is and the way that I taught, it comes across kind of fake if I try to make learning the laws of exponents fun. They're not fun. They're laws. You memorize a definition, right? But if I can make the aspect of just wanting to show up to Mr. Johnson's class, that was the win for me. It wasn't necessarily make the material fun, because kids see through that. I've got high school kids. They don't want to play all these games, right? Every once in a while, it might be cool as a novelty, but if it's like a weekly thing, they're done with it. So I never did the Kahoots and all these random things. I just wanted to try to, bring some humor to my class, be understanding, be open, and, allow them to say, okay, I'm cool with coming to Mr. Johnson's class. I don't care that it's math. I just, I'm okay showing up to his class because it's going to be maybe not a good time, but it won't be super boring.
Not horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a couple things that you think would help our society at large if we started teaching them in schools, like, personal finance, how to do taxes? Is there anything, top of mind that you think would really be beneficial for kids?
Well, that's a lot of times that's the first thing I hear. that is taught in schools. We teach personal finance, we teach taxes. Now, it's not a quote unquote mandatory class, but it's there. It's very easy to take. The one thing that I think about education is that the entire education system needs to change. We've been doing education more or less the same way for about 200 years. It has not been updated. The things that we teach more or less are exactly the same as they were, 100 years ago. The way we teach it's changed. And of course, we have the Common Cores and all those different things. It's basically the same thing. I think we need to shift the way that we're learning back. And what I mean by that is the way we learn things for our 2-year degree should really be what high school looks like, where kids should be focusing on something that interests them. Instead of taking 4 core subjects where you're learning things that the majority of people don't care about. And it's not just a math thing, right? Like the majority of people do not need to know trig, right? A lot of people do, but general consensus is when you get to Algebra 1, that's really all the math most people need to know for their life. Mm-hmm. But it's not just math. In high school, you learn how to, identify the parts of a cell. Who needs to know how to do that? You learn, all these different histories. And granted, history is extremely important, but you learn a lot of history up until 8th grade, right? High school, do you need to know any of it? Nah. You can learn it in different ways, or you can kind of pick and choose, what. Mm-hmm. English doesn't have to be nonfiction books and haiku poems, right? It can be something that's specific to what it is you're interested in. So I think that we need to have a shift in terms of getting away from the 4 core and making, with all the technology we have, education far more customized and doing things that are actually interesting to kids and doing things that involve technology. Coding shouldn't be, the one elective class that the kids who are good at math get to take. Because I'll tell you right now, I had kids that were really good at coding that were terrible in math class.
Interesting.
That's not necessarily an indicator, because I'll tell you right now, especially people like you and me, if it's not interesting to us, we're probably just not going to do it. And that's very much reigns true for a 15-year-old. So let's do something that's interesting. So we need to shift everything back. There's no reason, if I'm going for a 4-year degree, there's no reason I should still be taking art classes if I'm a math major, right? Mm-hmm. At least not to the extent that it's half of the credit hours that I'm paying for.
Right.
So I just think everything needs to kind of be shifted back, and customization of education should start in high school.
I couldn't agree more. What you suggested is exactly what I think. I think the last 2 years of high school should be interest-based, where it's kind of like you said, it's that first 2 years of community college where you don't necessarily pick a major, but I think I'd like to be a cop. So the last 2 years, I'm more learning about criminal justice. I'm doing ride-alongs with the local PD. I'm learning how to be a cop. 6 months in, I'm like, you know what? Not really for me. Okay, do something else. And now when I'm entering the real world, I've tasted. I have an idea of what I want to do. Not, okay, now I'm 18. Now I'm 20. I just realized I don't like what I want to do. Now by the time I restart, graduate college, I'm 24, 25, $200,000 in debt. And hopefully I figured out what I want.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. It can be any time in high school. It doesn't matter. But I think at some point customization needs to happen, and that will allow so many different. There's a huge snowball effect to this. Instead of having teachers teach all these random subjects, now you can have teachers just be facilitators, and kids can be online or whatever doing a completely customized curriculum and working on things where you have teachers just helping them out with whatever. They don't need to be subject matter experts necessarily. You don't need to have a teacher that can know criminal justice and all these different things, but can just be kind of a wealth of knowledge otherwise and knows how to find the answer. Like, teachers don't have to be an encyclopedia, but we better know how to figure out what it is. And we're not using technology. Like, the COVID, I think, was a sliver of help to education in terms of bringing out the things that were not going well. And it kind of exposed them. And right now, education, I think, is getting to that rock bottom where it's going to need to get to before real change happens. But I'm not convinced real change is going to happen for a while, because it's such a big change that needs to happen.
Me too. It's a complete overhaul of the entire system. But to your point, I have 2 youngsters in elementary school. I have noticed the adaptation of technology a little more, using, Chromebooks and laptops, which, to your point, you don't need to know answers anymore. Everything you need to find is a Google away. It's kind of silly to think that we should know everything when When's the last time if you didn't know an answer, you're like, ah, shit, I guess I just don't know the answer
Right.
in the real world, right? And that's just not how it works. If we're preparing kids for the real world, then let's teach them how to find the answer, not necessarily memorize every part of a cell.
Right. Memorization is kind of out the window when you have, the internet in your pocket.
Yep.
It's about teaching kids how to research and know what's not I don't want to say what's right and wrong, but know, fact from not fact. In the days of fake news, quote unquote, how do you tell? Because if I look it up online, I will find the polar opposites of a fact written as if it was fact. It depends on the website that I go to. How do you teach kids that? And I think we're starting to, and that's always been a part of, I believe, the history realm of, separating fact from fiction kind of thing. But it goes so much deeper than that.
We've spent a lot more time talking about education than I had anticipated.
Well, I get on my soapbox about, how, and that's the thing with kids now. I've got really strong opinions on education, and it's going to really determine what I do with my own kids when they get to that, high school age. And it's a conversation that my wife and I are already having. Like, what are we going to do? Am I going to, keep them home and, maybe have a few other kids join them in homeschool and because, the way the system is right now, I'm not in favor. So.
Yeah. Well, that's the nice thing about these conversations. You just start talking with no real place to go, and you end up talking about education for 20 minutes. But one thing I did want to ask is, obviously you're still in that birth scaling stage of your business. Yep. What's been the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome so far, other than getting a business off its feet?
It's been niching down. When I started out, I was doing everything because I could do everything. Mm-hmm. I was doing SEO. I was doing some website things. I was doing some Google Analytics, like GA4, Universal Analytics type stuff. And what I found is I was too broad, and I needed to niche down a bit. And quite frankly, the marketing, I'm not a marketer, right? I'm a data guy. So I kind of broke away from those marketing things, and I started focusing really on the highly technical, the machine learning, the artificial intelligence, the data visualizations, those type of things. And I'm still continuing to niche down. I actually just changed my website last week and completely overhauled the way that my offerings looked on my website. Mm-hmm. So I'm still kind of learning and focusing on that in terms of what people are looking for. Because I do want to focus and provide analytics to small businesses in particular. Now, of course, I have huge clients, the federal government, huge healthcare companies. But I really enjoy providing these services to smaller, either startups or entrepreneurs, because they wouldn't have access to this otherwise. You've got the Metas, the Amazons, they develop all these machine learning models, all this AI, and they're using it to their advantage. And it's right now, it's kind of a have and have not kind of thing. And I want to provide it to those that don't have it. Expecting people to do it themselves, and it's a highly technical thing. It's not just as easy as point and click. And I know there's a lot of these no code options and everything like that, but I think those are the most dangerous things right now, because you have people that are saying, okay, I can just click a few buttons and get this, but they have no understanding of what it is they're actually doing. And they're just blindly trusting what this is spitting out without knowing what it is. Just because you can click a buttons and get a graph or a synopsis of something doesn't mean it's correct. And I think those are really dangerous, and they're coming up a lot more because it's, I don't need to pay for a guy to do it for me. I'll just do it myself. But then you're getting completely wrong data, completely wrong information.
Which kind of defeats the purpose.
Exactly. And but then it's almost worse than trusting your gut, because, what people do without data is either use prior experience, or they just kind of trust their gut in these important business decisions. Now they're doing things in a way where they think they're getting a right answer because they can click a few buttons. And it's now telling them it's presenting it as if it's fact, but it's wrong because they don't understand the background behind what they're doing. And that's almost worse. So, if I can provide those type of services to people who, aren't able to do it themselves and, wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise, because, obviously it can be incredibly expensive if you go with a boutique consulting firm. That's what I really enjoy.
Are you a one-man team, or do you have any employees?
So I have some contractors that I work with. I have some 1099, they're not employees, but I have some people that do work for me. The majority of the work that I do is my own. And then if I have something specific that I need done, or whatever the case may be, I'll bring in a 1099 guy who's kind of specific to that, and, let him take over, let him or her take over, and then I'll just oversee and provide it where I can. I do have an intern that I have doing some work for me right now from Lemoyne. I do work with some of the analytics students there and do some mentoring. So I brought him on because he was interested in sports analytics. And I do some work with the ABA basketball team here in Syracuse, the Upstate Trojans. I do their analytics and stats. Nice. So I let him, help me out with that for a bit towards the end of the season, and it went very well. So he's doing a little extra work for me as well that hopefully will be a nice project that he can put on his resume when he starts applying to jobs.
Yeah, awesome. Is that something you'll think you'll continue to do in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I came from education. I really enjoy helping people. I was tutoring for a long time. I had to stop that just because of just time constraints. But mentoring is kind of that next step that I can do that'll, kind of help people get into my space and into the realm of analytics, which is becoming a lot bigger right now, but also becoming a bit saturated. So kind of helping people, navigate entry into the field. I'm always happy to help.
That's actually a perfect segue to my next question. Did you have any mentors or anyone help you get your business off the ground?
Stubbornly, no. I always had people that were willing to. I guess with this particular business, it was so new and niche that there was nobody around that really, I could use as a mentor. I did see things online and would, take things from those and kind of teach myself, but I'm very stubbornly a self-teacher and figure it out myself kind of person. So I do not take advice super well. I'm working on that. I'm becoming a lot better, especially as I get deeper into my business. I'm working with the Small Business Administration now. So, I have a mentor there who's helped me out just with some things that I haven't seen before in terms of, how to classify my company, things like that. So what's hard about what I do is not many people do it. So it's hard to go in and even look at another business and copy what they're doing, because I as far as I know, I'm the only person in Syracuse who does anything like what I do.
Yep. If you could go back in time, do you wish you would have gotten some help?
It certainly would have made things easier, but I don't know if I necessarily would have learned as much. I really think there's something to be said for failing. And I think failing needs to be more openly accepted and taught to kids that it's okay to fail. Like I hate that going back to education, damn it. But I think that curiosity is killed in elementary school, and the fact that we grade everything, it's outrageous. Nobody learns something and isn't wrong. The smartest people in history, I promise you, were more wrong than right. But I think that failing is a lost art, and I enjoy doing something not going well and then figuring it out and tweaking it so it does better.
There's a good quote on that I saw the other day. It's, in order to succeed at anything, you have to fail first. You can't succeed without failing. If you think about it, in order to learn anything, you have to be wrong first, which is like the ultimate, interesting. It's interesting.
It is. It is one of those. Damn it, I'm back on education. But when at the beginning of every year, I would teach growth mindset. I would specifically, the first week of the year, I would teach no math. And I would only teach growth mindset. And one of the things I would tell my kids is, before you were good at something, you were bad at it, which is basically that exact same quote, right? Mm-hmm. But, I'm not a math person. I'm not good at math. Nobody really is. You've got to be bad at something before you're good at it. The hobbies that most kids have, that most people have, like I love to play basketball. Do you think my first shot I made? Absolutely not. I probably missed my first 100 shots at a basketball hoop. And eventually you start making them and you get better. But you've got to be bad and work through that to get good.
Would you say, that failure mindset and the openness to lose is a credit to your success in life and business? Do you think it's that important?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the fact that I did things, quote unquote, my way, that my parents would tell you I'm the most frustrating child on this planet, because I didn't listen to a damn thing they said for the most part. I kind of did things my own way. I didn't do things just because it was the way people did it. I did things that I really felt were the right way for me to do it. And because I kind of figured out my own story, my own way, I really believe that is the road and the path that led me to where I am now. And I don't think I would have done that otherwise. I don't think I would have taken the chances. If I had kind of listened to everybody, I think I would have played it safe and, gone to school for maybe something, maybe math, who knows, and just kind of gotten a career and kind of stick in it, as opposed to being okay with saying, all right, no, I need to change careers. The changing careers is scary. Mm-hmm. Going into taking something that you have experience in and going into something you have zero is a huge leap. And, I don't think if I had any other experience than what I did have, I would have done that.
Building off that, do you think there are any specific principles or philosophies that guide your decision making in personal and professional life?
Just be okay with failing. We only have one life, and I don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to say, well, I wish I had done this. I was scared to make this decision. Now, it doesn't mean be reckless. There is a definitive line between being reckless and taking chances. But I really am very heavy research based. I'm very much into continuous learning, into looking things up ad nauseum to make sure that I'm making the right decision. But I'm okay with making a decision that maybe goes against the grain. And, might not be what other people would do, but if it makes sense to me, then I'm going to give it a shot and try it. It doesn't mean I won't necessarily have a backup plan or something like that. But, I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens.
I always say my biggest fear is being like 88 years old and not being able to do something that I could have done now and wishing that I had done it. That's like my biggest fear. So
Right.
if there's something I want to do, or like this, for example, it could absolutely fail. I'm putting it everywhere, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. And if it fails, I could not care less. At least I tried. When
Exactly.
I'm 90, I'll be like, hey, I tried to have a podcast one time. It didn't work, but it was fun. I had some fun conversations and I crossed that off my life list. I did it. And that was cool. And likewise, I don't give a fuck if I fail. I don't care what you think about my failure.
Exactly. There's definitely been times growing up where, I made the quote unquote safe choice. And more often than not, I've regretted it. I remember in college, when I was getting my bachelor's, I had the opportunity to go to Eastern Europe for a study abroad. And I didn't take it because I had a job and I had to pay for things and I had, my apartment. I don't know if I would have been able to just do it. I should have just done that. The experience would have been incredibly cool. But I didn't, and it's something that, I regret. I wish I was able to do that because, you get older, responsibilities start coming up, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's not just I have a job I have to worry about. Now I have 88 different things, a family, a house, the whole thing. So, if I could go back in time, I probably would have, just gone for it at that point in time. But the safe choice wasn't always for me.
Yeah. Are you a big self-reflector? Do you spend time reflecting on those decisions like that?
I do. I'm not so much a sit down and write things down kind of thing, but my brain doesn't shut off. I'm very much, my brain is in constant motion. My brain is always thinking about things, and it's very ADHD where it's like this will lead to that, will lead to this, will lead to that. So yeah, I do a lot of reflection and, just thinking about, decisions that I've made in my past, and I try to apply it to what's coming up next. And I find that, the longer I go, the less bad decisions I make.
As far as business in Syracuse specifically, what would you say to anyone who wanted to start a business here, in the CNY market that could push their business over the edge? Or do you think there's certain networking groups they should join? Any, habits they should start for, Syracuse specifically?
Yeah. So in terms of, just to preface it, with my business in particular, very few of my clients are actually local. Most of my clients are scattered throughout the country. So I'm actually trying to kind of increase my business locally as we talk. But I'm actually the moderator for a Facebook group, CNY Professionals and Entrepreneurs. And we hold networking groups every so often. It was a bit more frequently right after COVID kind of opened up. And then also the CNY Professionals Under 40 networking group. I joined that, I think, in the last few months, and I've been going to those. I sponsored one of their events, their holiday party, actually, back in January. And that's been a great networking group to be a part of. It's absolutely huge. I'll go to networking events for industries that I'm not even in. So for March Madness this year, I took a day and I went to a networking group for insurance professionals. And I emailed them and I said, hey, like, I'm not an insurance professional, but I do have clients that are. I just want to come by, hang out, meet some people, and, I'll just kind of leave. And they were like, absolutely, come on in. And I had the greatest day there. I sat there, watched basketball, had great conversations with people, not in my industry at all. Haven't really had a sales conversation after that. I've had some people that showed interest at the event, but to me, that's irrelevant. I made great connections, had a great time. So it's just getting out there and meeting people. There's absolutely networking events and things to go to. There's the CEO has all of their things. There's CNY SME. And I've been to some of theirs as well. There's all kinds of events. I know I try to do as much with Ed 23 as I can, but Devendorf's always putting out something that I try to get to as well. I'm trying to get in with him so I can hopefully get some work for him done as well. So I'm still working on that, but yeah, anything I can do to stay in sports.
He's coming on the show at some point. Just trying to figure some time. Yeah, he's a busy guy.
He is.
But yeah,
great guy.
I always say networking, going to networking events and just rubbing shoulders and having a beer with someone and talking about things other than business is always going to net the best relationship.
Absolutely. Building a relationship is everything. I mean, it's really funny, the things that I took from my sales career into education, and the things that you can apply from sales into education is staggering. And then applying both sales and education to what I do now, it's huge. It's huge. Building relationships is literally everything. And if I hadn't gone and had my sales career, I don't know if I would have that in my repertoire. Just the ability to talk to people and not worry about selling or anything. Just build the connection, build the relationship, build the trust. And then say, oh, this guy does AI. I have a question about that. Let me message him.
Yep. And I do the same thing. I'm pretty much been a sales guy my whole career. And I think people are usually surprised by how little I sell.
Yeah.
I'm just hanging out with you, guiding you along the way. And then at the end, do you want to buy it or where you at?
Right.
I'm not like the hard close type of guy. I'm going to build a relationship. And I'm up front. I'm like, listen, I care more about your pocket than mine. If you don't want to buy it, don't buy it. If you want to buy it, great. I think that leads and nets more results, honestly. But I really feel that way. I would much rather you make a good, sound decision for you while I'm walking you through the process and just helping you as a friend make a decision.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. When I was in car sales, people come in with a preconception, being a young guy at that point was a young guy, but them coming in and, saying they have a preconception of what I'm going to do or how I'm going to be, the car salesman tactics. So I had to kind of do everything I could to eliminate that in terms of the way I approach people. And that was absolutely that. I was not a hard closer. That's not what worked for me. It's not even what works with my personality. It was just, here. And if at the end you walk out and you bought a car, great. But, I had great success doing that. I had great survey scores. I was top 1 or 2 in sales more often than I wasn't. It worked very well for me. And I applied that, going into education, in terms of just not being the hard nose, like trying to be laid back, but with a hard line in the sand about, where respect started and ended. That's, if I can teach any teenager anything, it's, about respect and accountability. But, just kind of, basically as a teacher, I'm trying to sell snow in the winter. I'm trying to sell something to somebody who doesn't want it.
Right.
So, bringing that into what I do now in terms of just, educating, talking about things, letting people know that it truly interests me and I'm really into this, and just going from there. Yeah.
I know you mentioned the ED23 thing. Is getting out in the community and volunteering something that's really important to you? And what do you try to, do in the community to stay involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I need to find my time again, but I did work with a lot of pit bull rescues in the past. I've got rescue pit bulls. I've had them for many, many years. So I try to do everything I can with the pit bull rescues, the dog rescues in the area, Q's pit crews, helping hounds, things like that. I do the mentoring, with Lemoyne students as well that I've been doing. But anything that I can go out and say, okay, I can provide something to them, I can donate something, I can, share my time. I'm always willing to do that.
And I want to give those specific rescues a shout out again. What would you say are the best rescues in the Syracuse area you've worked with that you would recommend?
Yeah, so we've got Recyclable is where I got my first rescue pit bull, who has since passed away, but great. I mean, I'm a huge fan of pit bulls. I'm a huge fan of rescues. So Recyclables, Q's Pit Crew, Helping Hounds. I'm going to blank. We got one of our dogs actually from a rescue in Rochester not recently, but about 2 years ago. And it's going to blank on me, and I'm not going to be able to remember it. But there's one in Rochester that's very good as well.
Gotcha. Okay. And, kind of wrapping up here, I think this has been a really great conversation. But one thing for me personally is, legacy and kind of what I'm leaving behind for my kids is something that's really, really important for me. And my last conversation with Dakota was really interesting because he's like, I don't think about it at all. So it's interesting how two people who, are both smart and are very retrospective about life can see it so differently. So for me, legacy is super important. It's something I'm always thinking about. How do you view legacy? Is it something that's important to you? And, what are you kind of hoping to leave behind?
So legacy over the last 10 years, it was much more important to me 10 years ago than it is now. I was actually a little bit stuck on it when I was younger, and it was something that I really thought about actively. And the older I get, the less I'm worried about it. It's not so much, legacy as much as it is just, enjoying where I am now and providing the right life in everything, for my family, basically. It's not so much about that. I do want my kids to be able to say, okay, here are the things that I did. Here are all the times that I failed. Here's all the industries I was in that I'm no longer in, that type of thing. But kept going and kept, changing, kept adapting, kept trying things, didn't stop, didn't quit. It's that type of thing that I want to really instill into them. I don't want them to be a kid that, necessarily does things the way everybody else does them just because everybody else does them that way. I want them to see the way I did things, and I went against the grain and I did what I thought was right or what worked for me at the time. And maybe I failed and that was okay, but I kept going. And if it didn't work, I tried something else. So it's more that mindset that, I really want active thinkers. I want them to, use their brain, trust their brain, and not necessarily, because that's what, with like mentoring and everything, like that's part of the reason I personally didn't have a ton. My father is a great individual. I learned so much from him, but I didn't really go outside of that to learn a whole lot from anybody else. And I don't even want to say I'm terribly sad about it necessarily, because I think doing it my own way and learning all the things that I did was helpful, at least for me.
It's invaluable learning.
Invaluable learning. It absolutely is. So that's really what it is. I want to leave that type of mindset behind. Just because you're not good at something now doesn't mean you're not going to be good at something later.
So it sounds like you've learned how to kind of slow it down and enjoy the moment a little more. Any 100%. Advice for anyone who's, always looking in the past or always looking in the future, worried about what comes next? Anything you can, say to just slow it the heck down for a minute and just be where your feet are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is like an analogy. So you can always change the direction that you're going to go in. Like if you have this roadmap of where you want to be, the finish line's always going to change, whether it's moving further away from you or it's just moving left and right, not necessarily further away, but just into something different. The past is what it is. It cannot be changed. There's nothing you can do about it. And you don't want to spend hours and hours of time worrying, stressing about something that's already happened. It's already done the quote unquote damage, right? If it's good or bad, whatever, it's already had the impact on you. It's your decision whether it's going to be impactful to you coming up, whether it's a good or a bad impact. So it's happened, learn from it, whatever the situation is. It's whether it's a personal thing, a business thing, whatever. But take that and just use it so that you can better everything going forward. Worry about the next couple steps and not necessarily what's happening in 5 or 10 years, because that can change. Have a goal, have a place you want to be, but realize that it's going to change. It might move, and just worry about what's happening next. It's those small steps. It's those incremental changes that are going to make the lasting impact. It's that, I don't know if you've seen, it's like a meme, but a graph basically where it's a 1% change or increase or decrease can drastically change things down the road. And of course, it's a math thing, which of course makes sense. But you've got this graph, and a 1% change, it's going to curve straight up very quickly. A 1% decrease is going to curve down. So it's the incremental change can make a huge impact.
I really believe in compounding interest in that way, where 1% every day. And there's a Japanese term called Kaizen. It's just built on that frame of 1% better every day. So I think that's really great advice. The past is the past. You can't change it. 1% better every day. But lastly, Nick, what's one thing you want people to take from this conversation from you, and one thing you want to leave with everyone?
Absolutely. So I think the one thing that I want to leave is keep learning. Keep educating yourself. The world is moving forward. Technology is moving forward. Everything is moving forward. If you're not continually learning something, if you're not doing something new with yourself, even if you feel like you're stagnant, you're actually falling behind, because everything else is moving forward, whereas you are not. So I try to make it a point, and of course, the busier you get, the harder it is. But try to learn something new. Try to better yourself. Learn a new anything. It doesn't have to be business related. If something interests you, learn about it. Research it. Keep your brain active.
Awesome. I think that's really great advice as well. Where can everyone find you? Where should they find you?
Yep. So I'm on LinkedIn, NC Johnson 315 on LinkedIn. I've got my business pages. I think it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's Nick at Ataviz, all one word. And my business website, atavizconsulting.com, will have all those socials. So you can go right there and just click on them in the top right corner.
And I'll put that in the description. Ataviz, Ataviz.
Yes.
You should know how to spell consulting. All right, Nick. I appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to see where this podcast goes. The first episode was fantastic.
Thank you.
So I'm definitely going to be following along for the journey.
Appreciate you, man. Talk soon.